There's a lever built into your body that most people never touch, not because it's hidden, but because it's too familiar, too close. Breath, you do it all day, every day, but what if I told you that your breath isn't just a passive process? It's the most accessible tool you have to override your brain's chaotic wiring. Every inhale and exhale sends a direct signal to your nervous system, telling it what state to be in. Calm, alert, focused, or afraid breath is unlike any other bodily function. It is the only part of your autonomic nervous system that you can take full control of at will. You can't simply will your heart to slow down instantly or your digestion to pause on command, but you can alter your breathing in an instant, and when you do, your entire nervous system listens. Breath is the handle you've been given to pull the levers of your brain and body. Most people go their whole lives never realizing that this one system, which runs on autopilot, also comes with a manual override built in by design. That's not an accident. That's biology revealing its intent. That's nature whispering that you were meant to be more than reactive. You were meant to be sovereign over your state. When you seize control of your breath, you seize control of the very rhythm that dictates how your brain perceives the world. And this is not metaphorical. Neurons in the brainstem, the pre-Bertzinger complex, are designed specifically to map each inhalation and exhalation to shifts in brain function. Faster breathing triggers a cascade of signals through the amygdala and hypothalamus, engaging the stress response, flooding the system with norepinephrine, preparing you for threat, and increasing vigilance. But slow, intentional breathing flips the switch. It tells the brain the threat is gone. It activates circuits that promote calm, clarity, and cognitive control. This is why ancient traditions emphasized breath, not because it was poetic, but because it was powerful. Science is only now catching up to the sacred. And if you're wondering whether this applies to you, whether your daily overwhelm, your mental fatigue, your loss of control over mood and focus can be reversed, then know this: the answer sits right beneath your nose. One deep breath is enough to initiate a shift. A few more create momentum. A practice of conscious breathing becomes a neurological training protocol, one that literally reshapes the circuits that govern your baseline. This is how warriors are trained. This is how monks prepare for hours of unmoving presence. This is how elite athletes master focus under pressure. And this is available to you, not in theory, in practice, but you must choose to engage the override. You must use what your biology gave you, and when you do, when you harness this mechanism that lives inside your lungs, you are no longer a passive passenger in the ride of life. You become the driver. You become the architect of your inner world. You become someone who no longer depends on circumstance for calm or clarity or courage, because you've realized you can breathe your way into those states. Not someday, not after the storm passes, right now in the midst of it. Breath is not just air. It is information, direction, precision. It is the brain's tool for transforming chaos into order, for converting stress into energy, for forging clarity out of noise. Breathing is not simply about oxygen. It's about rhythm, regulation, and access to your higher faculties. When you control your breath, you're doing far more than just calming down. You're shifting the entire landscape of your neurobiology. You're interrupting stress loops, suppressing overactivation of the limbic system, and inviting the prefrontal cortex back into the driver's seat. That's where executive function lives: focus, decision, making, discipline. But here's the profound reality: breath isn't just a tool for recovery, it's a tool for readiness. The Navy SEALs use it before breaching a door. Surgeons use it before the first incision. When done with intent, even a single cycle of slow inhale and longer exhale tells the body that it's safe, and safety is the foundation of power. Because when the brain feels safe, it unlocks capacity. It stops wasting resources on protection and starts channeling them into precision, creativity, clarity. It gives you back control over your internal state, so the external world doesn't hijack you. And if you think that's too simple, that something as basic as breath can't possibly rewire your mind, you've misunderstood the elegance of biology. The most powerful systems in the human body are the ones hiding in plain sight. That's not weakness, that's design. When you breathe with awareness, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, heart rate slows. Blood pressure stabilizes, cortisol levels drop, but more importantly, your awareness expands. You can feel more, sense more, choose more. This is what elite performers tap into, not because it's mystical, but because it's measurable. You don't need a retreat or a guru, you need 5 seconds, a little intention, and your lungs. When you combine those three, you unlock access to circuits in the brain that are otherwise dormant during fight or flight. You bring back nuance, you shift from survival to strategy, you stop being reactive and become responsive. You create a pause, and in that pause, everything changes. That's not psychological fluff, that's neurological leverage. It is how the brain learns to shift gears deliberately instead of being stuck in high, alert autopilot. It is how resilience is built not through brute force, but through deliberate regulation, and it begins with breath. Not someday, not when it's convenient, but now, while the pressure is on. Because breath is the only system that works in real time at the speed of thought, without needing external tools or support. It's not abstract, it's anatomical, it's precise, and it's yours. Every decision you make is filtered through the chemistry of your body. And that chemistry is not fixed, it's trainable. One of the most powerful ways to rewire your mind for discipline is to manipulate your internal state before behavior even happens. Most people think discipline is about sheer willpower, but that's only a fraction of the story. Discipline is deeply biological. It's rooted in the ability to override impulses, and that override happens through the prefrontal cortex, exerting control over subcortical regions that want ease, escape, and comfort. The bridge between intention and execution lives in the space of internal agitation. That's the friction most people run from. But if you learn to lean into that friction, to harness it instead of fear it, something fundamental shifts in the brain. Neuroplasticity doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's gated by neurochemicals like dopamine, epinephrine, and acetylcholine. And those chemicals are only released when the brain senses that effort is meaningful, when the act of doing the hard thing becomes rewarding, not just the result. That's the real rewire. It's not about hacking your way through shortcuts, it's about reconditioning your system to feel energized by effort. And this shift doesn't require years. It can begin with one small action repeated with intensity and intention. When you delay gratification, when you resist the easy out, and when you act in alignment with a larger goal even when your body screams no, that's when synaptic change happens. That's when new circuits fire. That's when the nervous system begins to expect challenge and interpret it as a signal of growth instead of threat. That's not discipline as punishment, it's discipline as evolution, and this isn't a philosophical belief, it's a biological process. You are changing what your neurons fire for. You are altering the very code that determines your behavior, your reflexes, your default states. And the tool to begin all of it, intention, followed by breath, followed by action, you shift from a passive consumer of your own habits into an architect of your own identity. You become someone whose baseline is not comfort but controlled challenge. That is not just psychological transformation, it is cellular transformation. It is the body and the brain learning to cooperate under stress instead of collapse. That is the edge most people never reach. Not because they are not capable, but because they haven't learned that biology is not the enemy of discipline. It is the foundation of it. The nervous system is not designed to keep you comfortable. It is designed to keep you alert, adaptive, and alive. When you engage in discipline, especially when it feels hard, you are activating ancient circuits in your brain that were built for survival, not convenience. These circuits thrive under conditions of consistent challenge. Each time you wake up early, Show up when it's hard or keep a promise to yourself. You're not just checking off a habit, you're sending a powerful signal to your brain. I am reliable under pressure. That signal is not lost. It gets embedded into your neurobiology, into the communication between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. What starts to change is your threshold for resistance. The thing that once felt hard now feels normal. You don't get rid of the difficulty, you build a new baseline, a higher one. That's discipline rooted in physiology. And this is spiritual work too, because the body isn't separate from purpose. The struggle you feel before doing something difficult is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that the brain is preparing to grow. Synaptic remodeling requires strain. It requires neurochemical tension. Dopamine doesn't just flood the system when you succeed. It releases in anticipation of a goal that matters, a path that stretches you. So when you do what you said you would do, especially when it's hard, you are not only progressing, you are training the very circuits that fuel long-term resilience. That's the hidden design. The body gets stronger through stress, the brain gets sharper through discomfort, and the mind becomes unshakable through repeated voluntary suffering for a higher purpose. The people who build true discipline don't chase motivation. They chase structure. They chase rhythm. They know that internal chaos is regulated by external order, and that the only way to create new pathways is to carve them again and again in the face of resistance. That is how warriors are made, not through inspiration, but through consistent, structured action that aligns the body, brain, and will into one unified force. You don't need to feel ready. You need to act anyway, because every time you do, you are wiring your brain to believe you are capable. Every time you do, you are installing the identity of someone who endures, someone who decides their state instead of waiting for it, someone who doesn't bow to the mind but trains it. When you begin to understand that discipline is not a personality trait but a trainable neural circuit, everything changes. Deep inside your brain, a powerful system exists called the corticostriatal pathway. This is where your intentions meet your actions. This network is shaped by what you repeat, what you resist, and what you reward. Every time you resist distraction, every time you choose discomfort over ease, you strengthen that circuit. And this strengthening doesn't happen in theory. It happens through literal, physical change in your brain. Myelin forms around the axons of neurons the more you use them, making the signals faster, the behaviors easier, the discipline more automatic. What was once friction becomes flow, but only after repetition under tension. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And the most important system is your self-generated reward. Dopamine is not just about pleasure, it's about perceived progress. When you teach your brain to release dopamine not when you achieve the goal, but when you take the step, you unlock an endless reservoir of drive. That's what separates the relentless from the distracted. They know how to link effort to meaning. They reframe resistance as progress. They understand that the harder the moment, the more plastic the brain becomes, the more open it is to rewiring. This is why adversity is not a setback. It is neurobiological opportunity. The more uncertain, uncomfortable, and unclear the path, the more powerful the transformation when you choose to keep moving forward. You aren't waiting for motivation, you are installing identity. Discipline becomes who you are, not because it's easy, but because you've practiced responding to difficulty with action. Every repetition is a vote for the future self. Every time you do the hard thing, even when no one sees it, even when it doesn't feel great, you are altering the chemistry and architecture of your own brain in ways that will serve you for life. This is a sacred contract between you and your potential. You don't build discipline by hoping, you build it by choosing. Again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, the sixth key to building unstoppable discipline lies in mastering internal state shifts through deliberate action. Your brain's default mode is not discipline, it's conservation. It wants to avoid energy expenditure unless absolutely necessary. But here's the paradox. Once you begin moving even slightly, your physiology shifts, heart rate increases, respiration deepens, neurotransmitters begin firing in alignment. Action changes chemistry. Stillness reinforces stagnation. The moment you take that first uncomfortable step, getting out of bed, starting the workout, sitting down to work, you signal to your nervous system that the mission has begun. And the system responds with increased focus, elevated norepinephrine, and amplified dopamine. The energy you were hoping would come after the motivation is actually created by the motion itself. The longer you wait for the feeling to begin, the further you drift from it. But when you teach yourself that forward movement is the catalyst, not the reward, you rewire your relationship to resistance. You stop negotiating with excuses, and you start operating from protocol. This isn't about force, it's about design. You build rituals that trigger neural priming. You structure your mornings, your breath, your exposure to light and cold, not as hacks, but as tools to train state control. Discipline is not a one-time decision. It's a collection of repeatable triggers embedded into your life that steer your biology toward action. And the most powerful part is, once that architecture is in place, it begins to run itself. You no longer depend on fleeting emotions or external inspiration. You become the architect and operator of your own drive system.